Welcome to another episode of Sacred Reviews. Normally I wouldn't review a game like this because I like to use clips from the game when talking about it, but I have 30 hours worth of footage for this game, and I'm just not willing to try and part out using my editor because it just can't handle it because most of the parts I'd have to use are for my Let's Play, and they're mostly 30 minutes long. So if I wanted to pull out some of the more epic scenes, I wouldn't be able to unless I recorded a recording in my editor or something messed up. It'd be a mess, to say the least. So I'm just gonna skip over it and work with just the webcam here. With that out of the way, Infinite Space is a great game. That is an epic sci-fi opera story, I guess. You got epic villains, epic heroes, and yet the game's greatest flaw is its greatest strength. It's a weird factor in the game, I guess. The game's best selling point is its long story. It's epic and all that stuff, but at the same time, it feels like the ending's very, very rushed. The last two chapters are dedicated to basically the overlords, which are godlike entities that are going to destroy the universe and then recreate it. Basically, they can't observe the universe, so they can't destroy it effectively without using observers and trackers. Basically, observers observe the universe for them, and trackers follow the observers. It's a weird system. I don't understand why you need trackers to follow the observers, but apparently they felt they did. Maybe it's because the trackers effectively keep placing where in time stuff is at, well, space and time, and the observers see it. Sort of a dual system to create a GPS here, I guess, or something. But there's so little time spent on the overlords. They basically get, like I said, 2 hours, the last two chapters, and that's about it. While they appear in the earlier chapters, they sort of eventually just disappear for like the better part of like 20, 30 some hours, and then all of a sudden just come rearing back in right near the end of the game. And while they help to explain why the Logavian Empire, who's really your biggest enemy throughout most of the game, is doing what it's doing because they want to stop the overlords from destroying the universe. This does help make the Logavian Empire a bit more gray, considering that their goal is the salvation of humanity, even if they're going to take away some of your personal freedoms in order to do it. Another factor that makes the Logavian Empire more great is that once you've been conquered by them, you are a citizen of that empire, and you have all the rights of a citizen. It also worked to improve the life on the planets that they do conquer, so many of the planets they've taken over actually do have better healthcare, less crime, and all that stuff going on for them. So you're like, it raises the question of the price of freedom, the price of better living might be freedom itself. And is that a price that people are going to be willing to pay? The game argues that that answer is usually no, because many people in the game will admit that they can't defeat the Logavian Empire, but they do offer you help at the last minute when you kill them, which is sort of strange. I guess they realize that rebelling would probably lead to their devs, but at the same time they want to help you as well. It's a strange sort of messed up. I don't know why they just don't switch sides and try to help you more directly, but I don't have to make sense of everything. It's a video game, right? Another factor to consider with the story, I guess, is that there's multiple characters throughout the story that die rather tragic deaths. One of the first ones is your mentor character for the game, who dies trying to protect Yuri, which is something that happens for a lot of the characters. Almost all of them die to protect Yuri or protect the crew as a whole. Though mostly it's to protect Yuri or aid Yuri. It's sort of tragic, I guess, in a way that the main male character has to watch female characters that are important to him bite the dust on a regular basis throughout the game. Albeit, two of the deaths are in the second half, and the first death is in the first half, and there's about a 10-year time gap between the two, so we have about 3 important women in his life that have bitten the dust over the span of about 11 years. One of them being his sister, who may also be his lover. Yeah, it's messed up, but you have to also realize that they are created beings that weren't born normally like everyone else in the universe as well. So it gets even more complicated. Outside of all the madness you got going on with the story, well, I don't know if it's all you can call it madness. It's a very well told story. The insanity of having to deal with an empire of 100,000 plus ships, yeah, that might be insanity. Actually, I think it's 1,000,000, because the Federation in the second part of the game has like 100,000 ships all told throughout the entire galaxy they're in. Gameplay level, this is the game sort of starts to fall apart though a bit. It has a sort of rock, paper, scissors system going for it, where barrages are more powerful than attacks, but they can easily be avoided by using dodge. Basic attacks are more powerful, can hit dodging units and do more damage, and dodge can be used to avoid barrages. It's not exactly the same as rock, paper, scissors, obviously, because dodging stuff isn't going to defeat anything. And attacks, while powerful, only shoot one round of ammunition, while a barrage, which takes a bit more of your gauge, because yes, you have a gauge that charges up over time. It takes up slightly less. You can get more shots off with a barrage than you can by doing a series of normal attacks, because it shoots off 3 rounds of normal attacks with a barrage. But it's more avoidable as long as you're paying attention. Sorry, having a hiccup there. Though the real star of the game is probably the fighters, which is sort of messed up. The fighters are actually probably more damaging than your regular ships for the most part. At least at the rate in which they can dole damage out if you have a very bad crew and can't get your gauges charged quickly. Ugh. That pretzel bar ice cream thing caught up with me, I guess. Though there is a couple options that I feel are sort of... There's one, I should say... Well, I guess 2 options that are sort of mixed bag, in my opinion. Well, actually, one's mixed, one's just terrible. The anti-air is completely useless. Firing your anti-air guns only stops fighters. It prevents you from... It doesn't help you avoid barrages. And quite frankly, it just emphasizes why you're better off buying fighters and just equipping a carrier. Or if you're really dedicated, spending the time to grind out all the fame you'll need to buy a Picaroon or a Corsair, and just buying, which are basically a carrier battleship combined together. So you can think of them as like a super carrier, and make them your main flagship, and then put 30 fighters on them, or buy 2 of them if you really want to go nuts, and have 60 fighters between them, and basically use them to dominate your enemies. Because fighters not only can help you pin down your enemies, and then if you have very long radar range, you can basically shoot enemies from a distance where they can't fight back at all. It's crazy. The more mixed option is melee combat. If you get up close to your enemy, you can board them and have a melee battle, which does work on rock, paper, scissors systems, where you have shoot. There's 2 different like shoot commands or something. I can't remember what exactly they're called, but each one has an advantage over one and a weakness to another one. If you're fast at it, the best strategy I've found usually is just to keep hitting shoot, because it prevents the enemy from retreating. And if you keep constantly hitting it, the enemy will eventually switch to one of the other 2 commands. So either they'll switch to shoot and take damage along as you are, and if you got a higher, more powerful unit, you can win that route. Or they may think you're going to switch to the other one and try to get the edge over you, so you'll now have the edge and type-wise and just start decimating them quickly if you have enough of a power advantage. Because if you have... There's a melee stat. The higher it is, the more damage you can do to the enemy. Up to a certain extent. I think usually it starts to fade out. Your advantage starts to fade away rather quickly once you get to like 50 points above the enemy. So, but is melee combat really worth using? Well, if you can't charge a barrage very effectively, or at least a series of them because your crew's tired, and you don't want to use fighters for whatever reason, or you don't have them yet because you're not far enough in the game, you can charge the enemy, get in close so their weapons really can't hurt you for the most part, and then melee them to death. And melee can be an effective way to destroy enemy ships, because you basically can take on all their guys at once, and this will blow up their ships. I don't know why it destroys their ships if you win at melee battles, but it does. Sort of a waste, because I'd rather keep the ship and sell it for more money. In fact, at least they could give you more money for using the melee battle system, instead of basically making it just about as useful as blowing the ship up normally with your guns anyway. Though probably the most interesting aspect of the gameplay is usually building your ships, because they're basically built using like a Tetris block system, where certain pieces, well, you can't rotate and move them. Well, you can move them, you can't rotate them to make them fit. So you'll usually end up with various ship blueprints you'll pick up over the course of the game, either as rewards for doing certain things or just buying them outright. And you can then build them onto your ship if you have enough money and your ship has room to fit it. This does make certain ships like the Picaroon and the Junkyard probably some of the better ships in the game because they have the most module space. Albeit the Junkyard's effectiveness as a combat unit is a bit mixed because it's a cruiser. Albeit actually, I guess I should say that the only units worth getting, only ships worth building are really the battleships. Yes, carriers are useful, but the destroyers and cruisers are almost worthless. Destroyers speed up the rate in which your gauge builds up, but since they have less weapons and overall firepower, obviously, you're usually just going to want to have a battleship because it has more weapons and they'll hit harder, so it'll kill the enemy faster anyway. You'll want carriers around because of how useful fighters are, and you need them in certain instances anyway in order to advance the story, so you're going to go with powerful fighters if you have found the blueprints for them, which actually does raise a point, I guess, on the New Game Plus. On the New Game Plus, you can unlock basically what they call, it slips my mind right now, basically, they're like a mobile suit or something. Well, they're not mobile suits. Mobile armors, I guess, you can call them, or consider them to be like. Basically, they take up more room than a normal ship would, but they're also more powerful to an extent. And you can basically unlock those in the New Game Plus, and then replace your normal fighters with them. Basically overpowering your enemy that way. Albeit they're not that much better than regular fighters. They're just slightly better. But slight advantages can be important, especially if you're playing this multiplayer versus someone else, because they're definitely going to want to try and get the maximum yield out of their units. Which is why there's passive and active skills on characters as well. Or at least most of the characters you can recruit have passive and active skills. Passive skills will be applied just by having them in the right position, while active skills have to be activated during combat. Whether it be ship-to-ship combat or melee battles. The active skills tend to be less thought about, in my opinion, because usually you're going to rely on the basic ship commands, like barrage, attack, or dodge, and not really worry about like healing your units and stuff like that through a second commander's ability. Because quite frankly, most of the time, if you've been grinding and stuff in this game, like you're supposed to keep ahead of the enemies, you're really not going to have to worry about losing people as much, or losing ships from the enemy attacking you. Or at least I never really had that much of a problem. Albeit you could argue that I basically bought a Picaroon early. Even on my original playthrough, not the one for my Let's Plays, I actually did get a Picaroon in the first chapter. And basically used it in the second chapter to my advantage, using its high health and high firepower to just crush people. I guess that's pretty much everything there is about combat. There is random encounters in this game. Because pirates are everywhere, and they will try to attack you all the time. Even if they're completely outclassed, if they had any brains, they would realize that. They'll still come after you. Music-wise, I actually do like a lot of the tracks in this game. And I will listen to them in my spare time every now and again. Graphically, the game's so-so, I guess. I don't really care for the 3D modeling of the ships because a lot of them are sort of ugly. But I do like the 2D character art we do get. I guess I did forget one thing about gameplay, is that oftentimes they'll present you with choices, but sometimes they'll only present you with one choice, which makes no sense for why it's a choice to begin with. Why do I have to click on it if I have no choice but to click on it? Is it to make sure I'm not dead? I don't get that. Weird aspect. Probably shouldn't be there. But I guess that's about everything I have to say about the game, really. It's a good game. It's a great game, like I said. It's not good, it's great. But it does have flaws that undermine that greatness a bit. It's definitely not going to be like the next Chrono Trigger, but it definitely deserves more recognition than it has gotten over the years. And that's really all I have to say about it. I guess this would have been faster if I'd written the script, but I always feel conflicted when I tried writing a script because I couldn't put all my thoughts and opinions in words really effectively. Till next time.